What's up? What's going on? Hide and read. Got a review for you today. It's a Western. It's Louis Lamour, Lonesome Gods. This book was awesome. Comes highly suggested. Um, so let's just talk about it a little bit. At the beginning of this book, there's a point blank headshot. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. At the end of the book, you'll forget that I'm even telling you this by the time you get there. There's a fight scene where a guy gets punched in the chest and his heart explodes. So at the beginning, and it's really at the beginning, and at the end, it's really at the end. You just maybe two chapters, buffering, two short chapters. A guy's head explodes. At the end of this book, a guy's heart explodes. I'm not sure what this means. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but it just seems like a little too symmetrical for it to not be done on purpose. So I was just reading Lonesome Gods this first time for fun. Maybe the next time I read it, it'll be more observant, because I do think this is probably Louis Lamour. Whatever he's trying to communicate with all those westerns, all of it's in here. So definitely gonna have to reread this a couple times. I'll be honest, it wasn't like the most. I wasn't like the most blown away by this book, but it has so many elements in here that it could be my favorite Louis L'Amour book. But it's just that I didn't have it wasn't like the most riveting experience. But I thoroughly enjoyed the book. I will be rereading it multiple times. Lonesome Gods, Louis L'Amour. It, like I said, it's got point blank headshots. It has a kung fu fighter in it. It has Mongolian horsemen. It has martial arts training scenes, boxing training, wrestling. It has ultra marathon race through the desert against horses. It has a man running versus horses, guys on horseback. It has there's just so much going on. Of course, there's a cattle drives, and this it's mostly horses, but I think every story element that's in these Louis L'Amour westerns, except I didn't get I'm forgetting pirates. Was a little disappointed. No pirates. There's some seafaring stuff, and I think they mentioned pirates one time, but wasn't really any pirates. It's hard to probably sneak it into this big desert epic, but otherwise all the cool Louis L'Amour stuff is in there. So, I was a little bit shy because it's so much longer than the other Louis L'Amour books, so I was kind of putting it off a little bit. No, it's fine. It's fine. It does get a little. It gets a little long. Like I said, it's like reading 3 Louis L'Amour books. So just give yourself that space and knock it out. I could have read it all at once. I didn't. I spread it over too long, like a month or something. But like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. We'll be rereading it. How about some elements that aren't in the other Louis L'Amour books? There's Russian spies in this one. I'm not going to tell you how there's Russian spies, because it'll definitely spoil some of the plot. But there's Russian spies in here, and I was really. It's kind of like when I read the first Louis L'Amour book that I read that had pirates in it. I was like, how did he sneak pirates into here? Well, there's Russian spies in here, and like I said, there's an ultra marathon race. It just it has everything in it. It has everything in it. I guess let's talk a little bit about what I think the most important part of this was. What Louis L'Amour is trying to communicate. There's a character in the book, and he's a giant. He's like a literal giant, and he's tied into a way into the story you won't find out till later. But this giant, he kind of strikes up a friendship with the main character, Johannes Verne, because Johannes Verne is living in the desert basically as a very young man by himself. And this desert is like not hospitable. So the natives and also this kind of mythical character who lives up in the woods, and he'll come down and he'll exchange like gifts kind of with Johannes. He'll take one of his books and then leave a new one for him to read, and like leave like pieces of food and stuff for him. So that they're kind of friends without ever meeting each other. And they're both like pretty lonely because they don't really have like a culture to belong to. Johannes Verne is stuck out in the desert because if he goes back to the city, they're going to kill him because he's the heir to this big Spanish royal inheritance in LA, basically, which is just a ton of property. So if he goes back, they're going to kill him because they don't want him inheriting the property. He's like a bastard, pretty much. And yeah, so these two characters, without ever really meeting each other, are good friends, and they kind of communicate through leaving each other books, which is kind of like, you know, what we do here. I thought that was pretty nice, and I think Louis L'Amour also, yeah, maybe he was thinking of his readers and, you know, kind of like leaving them stories and things to read and stuff to chew on, basically, and without ever meeting each other, that we could have these kinds of like relationships through just shared literature, basically. So I thought that was really cool. I'm sure that's important for an author, and he communicated it very well through this literal giant character. I wish I had taken notes when I was reading this, because there's a scene at the end where the giant explains that he doesn't belong to society. There's really nowhere for him to go. Here we go. I found it. Are you never lonely? When would I not be lonely? When a man is one of a kind, he will be lonely wherever he is. I am a man apart, but have become adjusted to it. I have the mountains, and I have my books. I also have the friendship of Johannes. And that's like one of the first things that this giant character says. Like before that, you don't even think that he's real, basically. The Indians talk about him. They kind of jokingly say that he's this like god, one of these lonesome gods, and he comes down and he kind of like, you know, he's like the guardian for Johannes. So I really liked all the characters in this book. There's a woman that's like very strong, and she mentors Johannes and a few other characters too, and she becomes like a principal character in the city of Los Angeles. And yeah, you get that a lot in these Louis L'Amour books. Strong female characters, and they're not like they're not annoying. They're not annoying. They're very down to earth. They're very grounded and realistic female characters, in my opinion. I guess that's like the grand appeal of Louis L'Amour. He really does, you know, and I really do think anybody could read these books. I'm so guilty of really the whole Western genre, just writing it off for like 25 years of my reading. I basically just looked at that stuff like romance for men, and even my idea of what that means, like romance for men, is different. But I was thinking of it as just like that, like gushy, cheesy Harlequin type stuff. And maybe there's a place for that too, and I just haven't gotten around to it. But right now, crushing these westerns. I started buying some older, like collectible western literature too. I'm going to show that off to you, so stay tuned. For now, highly suggesting you go read any Louis L'Amour book. And if you have Lonesome Gods, don't be shy. It's a bit longer, but very similar experience to the rest of them. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Was it my favorite Louis L'Amour book? I don't think so, but it definitely has some really cool scenes and story elements that I wouldn't want to go without. And this is Louis L'Amour in high form. He knows what he wants to say. He said it a bunch of times already, and you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it right in the face. He's gonna jab you a bunch of times with this nice piece of literature. Lonesome Gods, Louis L'Amour. I've talked enough. Find something to read. Find somewhere to hide. Get out of here. Peace.